This episode of Fearless Rebel Radio is brought to you by You on Fire. You on Fire is the amazing 12-week online group coaching program that I run, where we build up your worth from the ground up so that it's no longer hinging on the way that you look. It's got personalized coaching from me and incredible community support, plus lifetime access. Get details on what's included in this program and sign up to be notified when doors open for the next cycle by going to summerinanen.com/you on fire. I would love to have you in that program and in that group. This is Fearless Rebel Radio, a podcast about body positivity, self-worth, anti-dieting, and feminism. I am your host, Summer Inanen, a professionally trained coach specializing in body image, self-worth, and confidence, and the best-selling author of Body Image Remix. If you're ready to break free of societal standards and stop living behind the number on your scale, then you have come to the right place. Welcome to the show. This is episode 141 and another installment of Classic Rebel Radio, where we revisit an episode from the past while I'm on maternity leave. Today, we are revisiting the interview I did with Kelsey Miller, creator of the Anti-Diet Project at Refinery 29 and author of the book Big Girl. I chat with Kelsey about her journey out of disordered eating, what she learned about herself from giving up dieting, and how she moved from the role of sidekick to leading lady in her life. This episode originally aired on January 6th, 2016, and I will be answering a listener question on what to do if you are afraid of people judging your weight gain. You can find all the links and resources mentioned in this episode at summerinanen.com/141. And just as a reminder, I'm on maternity leave until spring 2019, so the episodes you're hearing here originally aired in the first 2 seasons of the podcast. They are some of your favorites and some of mine, so I hope you enjoy listening to them again or hearing them for the first time. Before we begin, let me give a shout out to Demigoddess Jess, who left this awesome review. I'm so grateful to have found Summer and her podcast. I found a community that feels like my first step to freedom from a relationship with food that has gotten in the way of my life. Your podcasts remind me of the effortless, peaceful way I used to relate to food in my body as a child and makes me believe it's possible to get back to that one day. Thank you, Summer. Oh, that's awesome. Such a good review. You can leave a review by heading to iTunes, searching for Fearless Rebel Radio, then click ratings and reviews and click to leave a review or give it a rating. That helps others to find this show and the information that you're learning here. And if you haven't already done so, please subscribe to the show via iTunes. Just click that little subscribe button or whatever platform you use, including Spotify, to never miss an episode. And don't forget to grab the free 10-day body confidence makeover at summerinanen.com/freebies with 10 steps to take right now to feel better in your body. First, I'm going to answer a listener question from Rachel. Rachel writes, I have so much anxiety surrounding seeing people I haven't seen in several years because they will see that I don't look anything like the thin girl I was 6 years ago. This worry of their discovering what I actually look like and trying to understand how I've gained this much weight holds me back from social engagement, which I know I wouldn't mind otherwise. For instance, I'm going to a friend's wedding with my husband soon, and I'm dreading what I will have to wear and how I will look in the pictures. How can I get a handle on this fear of people seeing me the way I look now? Thank you so much for submitting this question. This can be really hard, and I think it's really hard for people who have gone through any kind of weight change because our society really has conditioned people to judge us and value us based on how we look. And I would love to say that there's a lot of people out there that don't, and the people in your life who truly love you aren't going to judge you for that, which I do believe that part is true. But I do know that we do come under scrutiny when our bodies have changed because we have been told that that has meaning attached to it, even though we know that that meaning might actually be a positive thing. In your circumstance, it might mean that you've got more freedom in your life now, that you're not imprisoned by dieting or disordered eating. And so rather than having you get a handle on the fear, I'm going to encourage you to make yourself feel as comfortable as possible and know that that fear is going to be there anyways, and do the scary things that you need to do to start to feel more comfortable just being around people that you haven't seen in a while. So I don't think we can eliminate that fear because it's real. I mean, it's a threat. It feels really threatening when we're afraid of people rejecting us. I can't remember what book it was. I think it might have actually been The Buddha's Brain, which talks about how experiencing rejection has the same physiological impact in our body as a root canal. So it's real. Like, this is real stuff. So, I don't want to invalidate your feelings. Your feelings are totally valid in this circumstance. And it's okay to be afraid of this. But we don't have to let that fear get in the way of us living our life. That's what I believe. So we can acknowledge that there's fear there and we can feel it and do the thing anyway. Because our inner critic, the voice that tells us that people are going to be judging us, people are going to be thinking these things, that's going to show up anytime we're stepping outside of our comfort zone. And anytime that we're seeing people we haven't seen in a while, or we've experienced body changes and we're around people that haven't seen those changes, that's outside of our comfort zone. So it's natural to have negative thoughts around it. It's natural to have assumptions that people are thinking things, and it's natural to feel fearful. But there's some ways that we can work through that. So number one, and seems kind of like a superficial recommendation off the bat, but get clothes that make you feel good. So especially Rachel, you mentioned you're going to this wedding. Make sure that you have something that just makes you feel really good. That's going to put you in a better position to just feel more comfortable with you. And that may seem like a really, superficial recommendation, but there is a lot of power in clothes that make us feel comfortable and make us feel good. Another suggestion I have for you is to take pictures now. So I would take pictures of yourself now so that you normalize how you look in pictures. And my colleague, Vivian McMaster, is a master at this. That was no pun intended. And she teaches people how to use selfies and self-portraiture in order to build up a sense of compassion with ourselves and acceptance of our bodies. I will be re-airing her podcast episode very soon. But the original airing was episode number 56, so you can go and find it there. But it's going to be re-airing in a couple weeks. Anyways, this is her area of mastery. So if you want more support around like how to normalize how you look in pictures, then definitely check out some of her programs, some of her work. But in the interim, I think what you can do is just take pictures of you so that you know what you look like in a photo, and that's going to help you be more comfortable with seeing yourself when the photos come out from when you've hung out with your friends or when you were at the wedding. Number 3 suggestion I have is to really have compassion for yourself and for the part of you that is genuinely afraid of judgment here. So there's a part of you that is terrified of being judged. And maybe you can relate to that. Like maybe you remember feeling that way when you were a kid. So you can kind of think about yourself like a kid version of yourself that's really terrified of like, what are all the other kids going to think and say about me? And I would encourage you to ask yourself, what would you say to that part of you? What would you say to a younger version of yourself that is really afraid of people judging her? And this is a good journaling exercise, but it's also just a way that you can cultivate compassionate self-talk, because compassion is really what helps us move through these moments of fear. So it's not about saying like, you're going to be fine, everything's fine. It's about saying, I know you're really scared right now, but we're going to do this anyways, and everything's going to be okay. So it's more of a gentle approach than trying to really like positively self-talk your way through it. So those are some tools that I would suggest using. And then just some thoughts I have about judgment. It's really important to avoid assumptions or mind reading. I think we often think people are thinking things, and maybe they are, maybe they aren't though. And if we can really call ourselves out when we're making an assumption or mind reading, that can go a long way. Like how do I know they're thinking that? And if they are thinking something about you, know that whatever someone thinks of you, it really only gives you information about them and our culture. So they've been conditioned to think weight gain equals something, whether it's, oh, this person like must have let themselves go or whatever horrible thing our culture has taught us about it. That is what they have been indoctrinated into the same system that we were indoctrinated to. So I'm not asking you to necessarily like forgive them or have compassion for them, but know that it says nothing about you as a person, and it only speaks to their beliefs that they've been conditioned to participate in and believe. And people who love you are going to value you and not care about your body size, honestly. If you have people who you think love you, but they are valuing you or judging you based on your body size, those are not your people. And you need to find people who do value you for you. And my other tactic that I want to say is do the hard thing anyways. So it's really important for you to go and focus on having the best time possible. So what do you want to focus on instead of what other people might be thinking? Do you want to focus on catching up with friends you haven't seen in a while? Do you want to focus on the music, the experience, like whatever you want to focus on, and really direct your attention toward those things and be intentional. And, anytime we do something hard, I think it's important to have like a bit of a pump up routine. Again, this sounds like a really cheesy recommendation, but if you think about yourself, like I know when I was younger, when I used to get ready to go out to party, which is something I haven't done in a long time, but I used to like blast music and like, get ready and make my, put on stuff that made me feel good. And it would go a long way towards just getting you in the mood of doing something like that. And so I think if you could have some kind of like routine that you do before you go to meet up with these friends that just pumps you up and makes you feel good, whether it's like you play certain music or I don't know, like you take a shower or whatever, like whatever's going to make you feel good. And then take up space. So really know that you deserve to take up space. You deserve to be present and you deserve to have a good time. And it's going to take practice to get to this point. But every time you do it, every time you see people you haven't seen in a while, every time that you go to an event that you're afraid to go to, that's going to give you more confidence. That's going to give you the resiliency to know that you can get through those instances. And the first one always feels the hardest. It's still going to feel hard the second time, but over time, it's gradually going to get easier. It's going to be more inside your comfort zone. And you're going to realize that everything's okay. And so it's practice. So we don't want to get rid of the fear. We can't get rid of that fear. The only way to do that is to make it a new comfort zone by working through the fear and moving through the fear. So I hope that helps. I hope everything goes well with it. And just remember that whatever people think of you is really not a reflection on you at all. Okay, let's dive into this episode with Kelsey. I think this is going to inspire you to just go out and live your life and be the leading lady, as she says in this interview and in her book, Big Girl.
Hello, everyone. I am beyond excited for today's guest. I have been cyber stalking this woman for a long time, so I'm honored that she's a guest here. Today on the show, I have Kelsey Miller. She is a senior features writer at Refinery 29, and you may know her as the creator of the Anti-Diet Project over at Refinery 29, which became one of their most popular franchises and won multiple awards, including Body Image Hero of 2013 from the Huffington Post. She has just released her book, Big Girl, How I Gave Up Dieting and Got a Life, which is the hilarious and remarkable memoir of a 21st century woman, Kelsey, reclaiming her life, beginning with her complicated relationship with food. Big Girl chronicles Kelsey's journey from self-loathing and disordered eating to food acceptance and overall mindfulness. Welcome to the show, Kelsey.
Thank you so much. What a lovely welcome. My goodness. I feel very over important at this moment.
Well, your book is awesome. I know we were just talking about this offline, but I read it from front to back this weekend, and I thought it was so great, so honest, so raw and hilarious. And I'm excited for you to share your story with the world and with my listeners today.
Oh my gosh. Thank you so much. Me too. It's like, it feels very real to hear you say that. And I really appreciate the kind words. I really do.
Yeah. I mean, it's pretty crazy to just have this going out to the world, I imagine.
Yeah. I mean, it's one thing to be, sitting in your bed or in Starbucks for, a year and a half, just frantically typing away and thinking, yeah, no, it's fine. It's whatever. It's what I'm writing. And then all of a sudden it doesn't really feel like a book. It took me about a year to feel like it was an actual book, to see like pages, bound together. Yeah. I still didn't quite buy it.
Yeah. And so, like I said, I mean, I ate it up like a delicious piece of cheesecake. And so I have so many questions for you. So I'm going to just start firing away.
Cool.
I would love to start from the beginning because you spent, more than half of your life, like 20 years dieting, and you've been through so many different programs, which you chronicle in the book. But the initial one that you talk about, where you were told to lose 10 pounds in 2 weeks at the age of 11, was probably the most shocking as a reader to see that. Can you talk about that experience and how that first diet influenced your relationship with food going forward?
Yeah, I mean, that was at once the first time I had been sort of publicly called out for my weight, by adults, by people that weren't my classmates. And so in that sense, it was very humiliating, like on a deep degree. I mean, my mother was there and I felt so busted. But it was also one of those moments where I was like, okay, this is it. This is the rallying cry, and this is what I need to just like shape up, you know? So it was almost like I felt like I hit my bottom at 11 and was like ready to get my shit together. And all I needed to do was to be told by somebody to do it, really. And I mean, then it became this transcendent experience where really and truly, you know, what we all sort of not so secretly believe when we're going on a diet is that like every single thing will be better once, because of this diet, because it's going to change your body, and because and then it absolutely did. I lost 30 pounds in 2 weeks, and because I was 11, and because they were it was talent agents who had told me to lose this weight. And you know, when you're an 11-year-old kid who just wants nothing more than to be a Broadway actress, like, you know, you're gonna do it, and you're gonna do it fast. And it didn't matter. Food just like it was just, you know, getting through the day to get to my next weigh-in, you know, and I had no problem just eating like cucumbers and lemon yogurt. And I think that's when I started eating Carnation instant breakfast. But it was like, all I really remember are like peeled cucumber slices and lemon yogurt. And that's basically it. And
wow.
so, yeah, I mean, when you're, a child, you have that, you have that physical ability, and I had that drive. And I mean, I got so skinny so fast, and I had all these new clothes, and I suddenly was like seen by my classmates as a girl. I was like the hot new student with these people I'd been in school with since kindergarten. And, as I say in the book, I got huge validation both from my mother and from these talent agents. But in the end, you know, I did not become a child movie star or a Broadway actress. Mm-hmm. It didn't happen. And so it just fell apart after that. You know, I couldn't maintain that kind of mania, which is really what it was, for very long. And so then, of course, it became the dragon that I continually chased. You know, I was just like, I just got to get back in that zone, that magical zone where I don't really need, I don't need to care about food. And I just need to sort of do it because I've done it before and I can do it again. And of course, it never was like that magical again. And of course, I gained way more weight back after that happened.
Yeah, that really planted the seed, you know, like I think it's such a young, impressionable age when you can sort of go through this experience where like you believe everything in your life will be better. And then it is. Yeah. Like, the way that programs your brain to, and as you put it, like, quote unquote, the manic power of skinny, like it gave you all that kind of power and validation that you really, at the root of it, were craving. And then that set you on this path for like 20 years to like try and get back into that zone again.
Yeah, that magical zone, you know, where everything is possible and your body is just sort of shocked. You know, it's a shock to the system in every single way. And I mean, I never did, but, you know, I can't say that I felt anything but wild joy, you know, during that time. And then, of course, the crushing defeat after was just deeper than any shame I had ever felt.
And that's how diets work, right? Like you get to that point where you feel that crushing defeat, that shame, and that's how they catch you to go back in again, because that's the only way you know how to get rid of it.
Exactly. I mean, I don't understand why, you know, I feel sort of like a conspiracy theorist when I talk about, you know, the big diet industry who's, you know, trying to get us. But it's true. It's absolutely true. It's like it's the most effective business model ever. It's already ingrained in us. And yeah, of course, when you fail and you fuck up, that's the only thing you want to do. The only solution is another diet, you know?
Yeah.
And there's always another diet.
Yeah, there, and you went through so many of them too.
Oh yeah.
And the book, you really talk openly about how, as long as you had been conscious of having a body, you felt like there was something wrong with it, and there was too much of you. And the one thing that really stood out to me was that you said, "No one found this more offensive than my mother." How did your mom influence your relationship with your body?
Well, God, I mean, Isn't that everybody's story? I mean, how much time do you
You're like, I wrote a book on it, didn't you know?
No. Because it's certainly she wasn't the only influence on my body, but of course, my mother, everybody's mother, is like, that's the person you just want to be adored by, and you want to be the most loved in their eyes. And I think she was really frustrated. I really don't think it never came from a place of like, you have to be skinny because, that's how I want you to look and stuff like that. I think it was just like, this is a problem, and, it's a problem to be solved. And like, why can't you just stop? Why can't you stop? And I'm pretty sure she was afraid for me. At least, that certainly came out much more with both my parents later in life, because I really wasn't overweight, when I was a small child. I just really believed so. And, I'm not really sure. I think my mom probably saw me, I had a very early adolescence, and I went through a lot of like change and trauma when I was a little kid. And I think certainly that had an influence on my relationship to food and to my body in a very tangled way, which I go into in depth. And I think that she thought she was doing the right thing by trying to help me, really. Mm-hmm. And every time, and I wanted her to help me. I wanted her to put me in line. All I really wanted was somebody to tell me what to do and what not to do. But, as soon as those rules are in place, it's like they're absolutely made to be broken. And so that's what taught me how to sneak. And I got very, very good at sneaking. And then, if I ever got caught, it was just like the most giant infraction. And I mean, I think it really, I'm sorry, I'm saying this in a really roundabout way, but I really think it started with my mom, with just those little tiny looks at the dinner table of like, do you really need that second helping of potatoes? That kind of thing. Where maybe if I had been, I don't know, an adult and not her child, and not a small, like a vulnerable little kid, it might not have been so crushing to me. But in my mind, it was just like, I just can't get this right. I cannot get in good with her. Mm-hmm. And this is the only thing that I need to fix in order to get her to totally accept me and totally love me. And of course she did totally love me. But, I think this is just a really difficult and complicated dynamic with moms and with daughters. And, certainly there was other stuff going on with my mom during this time as well. And, I think it's really hard. So I don't let her off the hook, but I do have empathy as well for her, Yeah,
it's so good that you can see that, because I do think at the heart of it, most of the time, moms are really just trying to protect us in a way that is not always effective for our mental and emotional well-being.
Yeah.
And I know you mentioned, like, you would get approval from your mom when you dieted. And so, how was it to break, as you got older, to break free of that desire to gain her approval?
Oh, man. I don't know that that's 100% gone. I mean, I think in practice it absolutely is. And I'm certainly not actively seeking my mother's approval now, mm-hmm. But there's still, I still have that feeling when I see her from time to time of like, oh my God, is she going to see, what is she going to think of my body right now? So that's a part of it. But yeah, I think to be set free from that. I mean, really the way that I had to do it, the final nail in that coffin was making this big life change, this very big, it's not like I just like quietly gave up dieting and just started eating normally. No, I like made a grand declaration, started a column, I have a new journey, and I wrote a book and everything like that. Like I had to do it. It's very hard. I had to make a very sort of big production of the whole thing. And, I think that doing that in this big demonstrative way, and also making connections with other people through doing that, through writing the column, is what helped sort of loosen that tie between me and my mother's disapproval of me. Mm-hmm. Sure.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah. I mean, I think there's so much shame in this, in like for women who are trapped in that dieting cycle, like, and with, who have the issues with, you know, not feeling comfortable in their body. And so for you to, you know, share that and gain that support and that momentum and really turn it into like this movement as opposed to just, you know, your journey. I imagine that would be just like this incredible support system that you you know, had for yourself. So let's talk about that a bit. So, you know, you mentioned the breaking point being when you were 29 years old and like you're working out with the trainer, and that was the moment you were done with dieting. What was going through your head at that time?
I think it was sort of the apex of all that shame, and not just shame in front of him. Yeah, because it was very emblematic of like, you know, middle school gym class and stuff where I'm just like, once again, not, you know, I'm still failing gym and I'm almost 30 years old, you know, and that's terribly embarrassing. And then it was also this feeling of physical discomfort, and it was almost like having an anxiety attack and an epiphany at the same time, where I was just like, I'm gonna stop. I'm stopping because I actually can't. I couldn't run anymore, and I couldn't feel this way anymore. You know, my whole life had been structured around the dieting cycle and totally controlled by my self-loathing up until then. And I'd really been stuck in this kind of limbo. And by the time I got to this run, I'd sort of managed to make a bit of a life for myself and really like frantically catch up to all the with all those milestones that I'd missed. I'd started dating really late. I'd started my career really late. And now that I had those things, I found that I couldn't do the dieting anymore. And I also couldn't do the self-loathing anymore, because when you are, you know, sort of getting jazzed about your career and trying to advocate for yourself and move forward, you can't really do that and be like, but I'm a piece of shit. And you can't be, I was in my first like committed loving relationship. And really, I think that was a huge catalyst, because as I say in the book, I think what I found is that you can love somebody else before you love yourself, but it is really uncomfortable for both of you. And it was like this constant, stalemate between us with this person who loved me and loved my body, and not just accepted me, but like was so psyched about me and my body. And I was like, all the time just being like, why? And what is wrong with you? And like, you must have this crazy fetish or something like that. And, you know, I realized in that moment, it all kind of crystallized, you know, maybe that is the magic of exercise when you have an epiphany on the Stairmaster or something like that. That my life and my, you know, relationship with food and my body were not gonna work together anymore. And I don't even think it was a choice between my dieting in life. I mean, I had to choose my life. So I had to give it up. And I'd had that, you know, vague sense. I'd heard of intuitive eating before, but, you know, it all seemed very fake almost, and like not real, and just kind of like hippy dippy. And I'm like, I can get hippy dippy, but you know, when it comes to, you know, I'll do that when I'm thin, obviously. I'll do that when I'm thin, you know, and when I meditate and, you know, all those other things. But really, I think that my mind hung on to that sort of that title for a really good reason. And that's really what dawned on me when I had that moment of a radical shift, you know, away from dieting, and that sort of grand renouncement of dieting and the way that I treated myself.
It's amazing how the universe can just like smack you over the head and just be like, what are you doing? Let's change this. That's awesome. So you went to work with an intuitive eating coach, and one of the first things she asks you about is whether or not you'll be okay if you don't lose weight. What were you thinking when she said that to you?
I was thinking that, like, I know the answer that she wants to hear is like that is yes, I'll be just fine, and I've totally accepted my body because I, made the decision to do so. But really, I did still, I didn't. I wasn't okay with that. I had to lose weight by doing this over and over again. She asked me, what do you have to do to trust this process? And to lose weight I said to lose weight by doing it. And, it took a lot of us doing those rounds for the message to really sink in that if that is the primary focus, it's just, I don't want to say it's not going to work because that's a very sort of diety term, but it's like, it's going to take a really long time for these practices and for this mentality shift to really, really happen. You have to sort of act as if, you know what I mean? Even if you can't totally make the shift you can't just automatically stop caring about weight. I don't know if somebody's got that plan, I'll sign up for it right away.
I'd be a millionaire if I had that plan.
I know. Can I just have like a little? Is there some kind of surgery? But really, I had to take a leap of faith over and over and over again. That I could decide not to focus on weight. And when I did that, that's when she was right. I mean, everything started to sink in. My relationship with food started to ease. And certainly I found myself eating in an entirely different way. And, as I did say in the book, when I really held my feet to the fire and asked myself if all that other garbage around food and obsessive exercise and constant self-loathing and not being able to look at myself in the mirror, if I got rid of all of that somehow and wasn't thin, if somehow thin wasn't solution to all of that, then I could accept that. But I wasn't going to tell her that in that moment.
Well, I'm so glad you're honest about that because, I think it's a common thing. And I think it's like, it would be unrealistic to think that you can let go of something that, you've been desiring and chasing and that you've intertwined with all of these expectations for yourself for like 20 years. To just say like, no, I'm good. Yeah, no, I'm ready to let that go.
I know. I think the thing that we all have to, that I write these pieces and I see these pieces more and more from people who do body positivity and intuitive eating work, which is like, even though you've made this decision, it doesn't mean that your brain is going to magically, create new neural pathways in that instant. You have to really practice it. It takes a really long time. You can change the way that you eat, and you can look at yourself and deliberately say, positive or accepting things. But that mentality is still in your brain. I'm still going to look at a potato and see it for Weight Watchers points because that's still there. Mm-hmm. I have to practice adding new thoughts into that equation.
Yeah, I hear you. Like I did the zone diet for a couple years and like I can't look at things without thinking that they're, the blocks, which is their equivalent of points. Mm-hmm. And it took me years to really stop seeing food that way. And sometimes it'll still pop up more in a joking way, but like, it did. It took years and years for that to go away. And so, the process for you moving into intuitive eating, you describe it as like feeling kind of foreign, and you mentioned you had to give yourself permission to eat and not diet over and over, which I think is important for people to know that it wasn't just like, all right, I'm doing this. Now I'm an intuitive eater. So how was that process for you?
I would say, permission to eat is something that is still in my life. The thing with intuitive eating, there are like chapters in the book and, you might look at them and think these are steps, these is one leads to the other, but it really isn't the case. They're sort of more like pillars, permission to eat and body acceptance and, gentle nutrition and the whole shebang. And I have to go back to all of those different things quite frequently because when I'm feeling insecure or really stressed out, of course, old habits, they come a calling and that's what your brain and your body knows. And it's really easy to not really backslide, but to have that stuff come up. And in those moments when I find myself sort of stressing out over a particular food item, I have to say, oh, you know what? Do I have full permission to eat this? Do I really, really have full permission to eat this? And that was what it was like in the beginning, was seeing all the things that I did not have full permission to eat, and all the things that I felt like a super special pretty princess for eating, like kale and cabbage and, other things that, if you eat a lot of them, it gives you a really bad stomachache. I had to really look at my food judgments in a very mindful way. There's a big difference, I think, between hypervigilance and mindfulness, and making that switch and also the switch from sort of like judgment of your food to curiosity about your food, which I think is really important. Was a difficult practice, but when I did it, then that was the beginning of food neutrality, and I just had to do it with every meal that came across my plate. And yeah, it did become easier. It became more instinctual, with things like, as I said, like potato products. It was a big bugaboo for me. And I had to really practice mindfulness with eating them and really being aware of my food judgments around them. And now I'm pretty good with potatoes,
Mm-hmm.
They're just food.
That's awesome. It's so good. And mindfulness went so much farther for you because, as you get to in the book, it really helps you to identify some deeper issues. Can you talk about what you call your real drug of choice?
Distraction.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Oh my God. I know I'm not alone in this, but I do think that in a lot of ways, I was sort of an extreme case. I was really, really always hooked on distraction. It sounds so crazy, but like when I was a kid, I was reading constantly. In the car, on the playground, any single time there was like a moment of silence, I was reading. I would read until the book fell on my face and went to sleep. And then it progressed to audiobooks. And then later, when I was able to have my own television, it was television, and it was musical theater was a giant distraction. But it wasn't just sort of like consuming entertainment in these moments. It was really getting out of my life, out of my house, out of my body. And that, I think, was sort of okay. When you're a kid, I think you are... It's okay to have that giant world of imagination, especially if you're having a hard time as a kid. You need some form of escape. But, it really became a crutch for me, and it became these more and more distracting habits became a way for me to sort of hit the snooze button on my life and be like, okay, I'm just going to stay in and watch this movie. And it's a really, really good movie. It's an important film. And I'm going to do that instead of going out and seeing people or meeting people or dating. And it was also it worked really well in tandem with a diet. Because when you're in that diet cycle, you don't really have time for much of a life. At least, certainly I didn't. That's what they all say is like, oh, it's lifestyle change, and we want you to be able to like go out and have cocktails with your friends, like in these commercials here. But I couldn't do that if I didn't have enough points or I didn't have enough calories left in the day. So I would stay home in my little nest, and I would have the TV on round the clock while I was, baking if I was in a bad phase, or making really healthy, almost 0-calorie soups if I was in a good phase. And then I would listen to podcasts and musical theater and audiobooks when I was walking to the gym and going home. And there was never no sound in my life, never no like narrative in my life. Even listening to music sometimes was a problem, because if it wasn't transporting enough, if I couldn't like imagine myself into a different world or a music video, literally, like as a 27 or 28-year-old woman,
Mm-hmm.
walking around and fantasizing like a child rather than engaging in my life. And when mindfulness came along and I was eating food without distraction for at least one meal a day, as I said, it sort of crept into all these other areas of my life. And I found myself grappling with silence and realizing that like it's a problem if I can't walk 5 minutes to the subway without a podcast on. It's a problem. You know, I think that it's not heroin, but it's, mental heroin. It's mental masturbation really is what it is. And I didn't want to have that crutch all the time because it made my real life feel shitty, in comparison. It made me constantly comparing my real life to the ease and the, extreme beauty of of a movie life or something like that. And, actively engaging in your life is a lot more complicated than sitting at home and watching somebody else do it, or listening to a book about somebody else do it, or even reading a book about somebody else do it. So mindfulness really sort of smacked me in the face in a big way in that regard. And I started to practice it in more areas of my life. And by that, I don't mean again, the sort of complicated meditative sounding version of it. I mean okay, you're going to take out your headphones for the walk to the subway, or you're going to eat, 2 meals without distraction, or tonight you're going to try reading 20 pages of a book instead of listening to a book and playing a game on your phone. And that was so much harder than I thought it would be.
Yeah, I think I love that you came to that realization though, because I feel like so many women can relate to that in one way or another. For you, it was like the podcasts and the musical theater and the, the sound. But I think for a lot of other people, it's work. It's like an addiction to stress. Like it's, even just like social media or always checking their phone. Like it's the sense of distraction that takes you away from just feeling yourself. And as you put it, like you had to get comfortable with feeling uncomfortable.
Oh, yeah. I mean, the power of that is enormous, because to be comfortable all the time and to have to be comfortable all the time, I mean, that is sort of an addictive feeling, because then when you're sitting in silence on the subway and you're crawling out of your skin, I mean, you feel like a total lunatic. I didn't want to have that. I don't want to be that person. I wanted to be able to get through a goddamn subway ride. It's ridiculous because, it also prevents you from, feeling the necessary discomfort of life or coping with it, really developing a sense of I can get through this, and that sense of self-reliance, and learning to ride out your emotions rather than dampening them with whatever you can grab and shove into your head or your mouth. That's a really important lesson. And I think, we all, social media is a big one. The work thing is a big one. For some people, it's sex and whatever. But there's so many ways to just pull yourself out of your life. Mm-hmm. And so for me, I mean, I certainly still listen to podcasts and I still enjoy television, but I make a really conscious effort to make my life be the biggest part of my life versus, distraction.
And I think dieting is a way to pull yourself out of your life, right? It gives you this thin fantasy. Yeah. And so, for you, what was really at the heart of your relationship with your body was this desire to be seen and to sit at the cool kids table, quote unquote. And you had this perfect fantasy of it. How has that changed for you? How did it feel to kind of, let that go and just sink into this is my life and it's not going to feel, like this fantasy all the time?
Well, it was really crushing at first, I think, because I think everybody is, this is an easy habit to fall into, but certainly if you're somebody who's lived in the diet cycle where you're always waiting for when I'm thin, it's very easy to get into that pattern in other ways where it's when I have this, when I get to this age, and then you have this, and then you get to this age, and it's not the way you thought it was going to look. And that, I think, is the biggest lesson of it, is it's not the way you thought it was going to look.
Yes.
And relinquishing that future thinking around everything makes you realize that, your life is pretty great, as it is. don't try really hard not to think about, 35 is going to look like this and I will have this, but to really, I think, get a strong understanding of the fact that your life might look a little different than you thought it would be. That eliminates the sort of the crushing feeling when it doesn't turn out the way you thought it would be. I hear about this a lot with vacation, actually. I've been talking about this with friends, where you have that feeling of like, my vacation is going to be so perfect and so relaxing and it's never going to rain and I'm just going to like lie on the beach and read 4 books. And then you get there and it's not as if your vacation is a disaster, but it's a little different than the way you imagined it would be. Mm-hmm. Not worse, even if it's not worse, but if it's a little bit different, I think your mind kind of freaks out and thinks it just gets overwhelmed with disappointment and stuff like that. And I think that's a really good example of how that bleeds into other areas of our life. So now when I go on a vacation, I really try and this is going to sound like really ungrateful, but I try to like lower my expectations or at least not engage too much with the fantasy of the future vacation and just get on the plane and go see what happens.
Yeah. And I think, that's a good way to live life, really, like in every respect, because I think we get so attached to the outcome, and the outcome is
that's what it is.
Yeah. It never is like, that the solution to all of our problems. Like it doesn't take away emotions, negative and positive. When we can like really detach ourselves from the outcome and just be present, which is really what mindfulness is all about. Mm-hmm. I think that can really help us to just settle into like, okay, this is my reality and it's okay to not be happy all the time. It's okay to not feel like joyous all the time.
Yeah. That when you can actually get your head around that, it's enormously liberating and everything feels so much better. That really is when things get better in a real and in that it not even in the way that like diets promise, because it's not like you are, queen of the world and you have $1 million the way that you kind of believe you will at the end of every diet. But it makes everything feel just better and more calm. And I'm not saying this is like an easy thing to do, but it's a good thing to strive for and to practice.
Absolutely. Yeah. And it certainly is. It totally is a practice and it takes a while. And I think like, it's just, I don't think that you ever get there. Like, I think it's just always something you have to be mindful of.
Exactly. The letting go of the there.
Yes, exactly. I think my favorite part in the book is when you kind of have this like, fuck that moment. And you talk about going from the sidekick to taking the leading lady role in your life and to step out of someone else's opinion of you and into your own true skin. Mm-hmm. How was that for you? How have you been able to move into that leading lady role for yourself?
Man, again, first of all, I'm really glad I did it, because when you're constantly thinking of yourself as, less than somebody else or the sort of sidekick in the story, like, my God, it's your life. What are you doing? Like, if you're not the leading lady in your own life, which I certainly wasn't, then like, really, what's the point here? And so I did to sort of make the decision to move into my own, it's hard to describe how it happened, but like, I was sort of comparing myself to other people, of course, and I was getting criticized basically for how I dressed and presented myself, and it took this sort of acute moment at work with somebody who I worked with for me to come to that realization that like, this isn't just about other people sort of picking on me. This is about me being comfortable being picked on, and really allowing that habit to continue in my life and frankly enabling it because it is more comfortable. And the other thing about being the sidekick or, the funny fat friend is there's a lot less pressure, and it's a lot, you can sort of, absent yourself from the picture whenever you want because you're not that important. And I had to really accept the fact that like I have agency. This is my life. I am the person in control of the situation, and that means I am responsible for how people see me and how people treat me. And if I don't want to take shit, I have to sort of do that for myself, as opposed to wait for some like buddy to come and stick up for me or inject me with self-esteem and tell me how wonderful I am. I have to really learn how to do that on my own, because we all do. And so it's really, the decision to be an adult as opposed to like a child with no agency anymore. And, as we all know, being an adult, I think, is way better than being a kid, because you have a say in your own life. And for that same reason, it's a lot more uncomfortable, because you're the only boss. You're the boss.
Yeah, I think one of my favorite quotes was, "You teach people how to look at you."
Yeah. You do. I think that is a complicated feeling, because when you are walking around presenting yourself as somebody who, as somebody who'd rather be in the background, then that's how people will look at you. And I felt very sort of like put upon by that. And I felt sort of, I'm being shuffled to the sidelines because of my body and I'm not pretty enough and stuff like that. And really, I had to own up to the fact that like, that's on me to a degree. Yeah. I mean, we all deal with cultural beauty standards and biases and bullshit like that. But I mean, if I get up and walk out the door, and the way that I dress, if I'm dressing in something that I really enjoy and feel physically comfortable in and feel confident in for whatever reason, then I'm gonna have a better day. And that's on me. It's all on me. Whatever you put on your body, however you speak to people, however you talk about yourself, that's how you teach people how to interact with you and to look at you. And again, nobody's going to be able to do it for you, and that's difficult and a bummer. But it also gives you the power over your own life. Mm-hmm. I'm sorry. I feel like I'm sort of like being rambly here, but I think it's because I'm really still dealing with this situation, especially as like I'm going into these weeks of like, the book promotion, and I feel like I'm getting, sort of more attention than I've ever dealt with. And, of course, this is like the attention that you always dream of and you want. People sort of reading my book and liking it and wanting to talk to me about it. It's amazing. Mm-hmm. At the same time, I'm like, oh my God, I just want to put on sweatpants and stay home. Don't look at me. Yes, I do. Yeah. I do. Yeah, I not in the same scale at all whatsoever, but I had a book that came out like this past month, and it was like traumatizing. Yeah. So, and sometimes like all the positive emotions can feel like negative, like too much positive can almost be processed as like, it's overwhelming. It's overwhelming. And nobody feels bad for you about that, by the way. It's like, I tell my boyfriend about it. It's so hard. And he's like, I mean, is it really? Okay.
No, I had to talk to like a friend about it, because who's a life coach, so she like totally got it. But because I was like, why am I processing this? Like, why do I want to cry? Like, I don't understand. I should be so happy. And so so it's what I'll say is it's probably normal. I'd like
Thank you for that. Thank you. I appreciate the validation.
But no, I love that you're so honest about it. Like, because I think we're all still trying to deal with this. Like, there's no such thing as having it figured out. And I think we'd be liars if we said that we did.
Yeah.
So yeah, I mean, with that said, like, what's your relationship with your body like now?
Well, it's good. I'd say right now I'm feeling pretty good right now. I think that, but I also recognize that it's all phasic, and that's okay. And just because I'm having a good body confidence day doesn't mean I won't have a shitty one tomorrow. And that feeling shitty about myself for a day isn't a failure. You know, I went through this period where I had gained weight because I was writing the book, which is, you know, as I say, it's not good cardio. Writing is not good cardio. And it's also very stressful, meaning that, you know, a lot of my old food habits really kind of were coming up in a big way. And that was tough. And I came out the other side of this and I thought, God, okay, I'm just going to admit it. I'm just going to say it out loud. Like, I have gained weight. You know, I declare it. It has happened. I'm not going to hedge on that. And it made me I felt very uncomfortable in my body because, you know, it feels better when you are able to exercise regularly. It just does. And it also doesn't feel good to gain weight in a somewhat short period of time physically. And certainly just that change alone is difficult, especially when you have a past with this. And it made me panic for a bit, but I had to make the decision in that moment that, like, okay, I can admit to myself that I don't like my body right now. I don't like looking at it. I don't like the way it feels. But I'm making the decision to accept it and to embrace it and love it and do it. And so, you know, every time I walked past a plate glass window, I would make a point of looking at myself and saying, you know, something good to myself in my mind, even if it was just like, okay, hey, I love you. Remember that I love you. It's okay, you know? And that was a really important practice, which is just like, you know, your body is going to change. That is a guarantee. Mm-hmm. And if you can't get through that, it's going to be really uncomfortable and unnecessarily uncomfortable and unhappy. And so I have to practice making a decision to accept myself no matter where I'm at. And, you know, the fact of the matter is I didn't like choke up and go back on at a diet, which I absolutely would have in sort of any other time of my life. I just sort of brought myself back to the practices of intuitive eating and mindfulness and non-distracted eating and getting myself moving again when I had time to exercise more regularly. And, you know, I'm feeling better now. I mean, I don't weigh myself. I don't really know where my weight is at right now, but I know that I feel better than I did a few months ago. And I maintain that body acceptance. You know, I do practice that daily because it's not easy. No matter what, it's not easy to, like, you know, look at a crappy picture of yourself. But you can have both those things. You can have like, oh, it's a crappy picture. I'm not psyched about it. And, you know, but I love and accept myself, period, end of story. That's it.
Yes. Yes. So good. Well, you've come such a long way. And I really, really thank you for everything that you do for, you know, for the anti-diet body positive community, you know, and for sharing that on the podcast today and also in your book. I'm super pumped about it. I'm going to link to it in the show notes for this episode, which will be at summerinanen.com/FRR-50. That's 50. It's episode 50. And thank you so much for all of your time today.
Thank you. So wonderful.
Yeah, to everyone listening, you can find Kelsey's book, Big Girl, How I Gave Up Dieting and Got a Life, January 5th, which will be the date that this episode comes out, and it will be available Amazon, Barnes & Noble, IndieBound, anywhere else that I'm missing.
Oh, basically everywhere. Anywhere you buy books, it's going to be there.
Awesome. That's really exciting. Oh my God.
Yeah.
And you can follow Kelsey's journey on Twitter and Instagram at Ms. Kelsey Miller or hashtag Anti-Diet Project. And also check out all of her articles at Refinery 29. You can read the entire Anti-Diet Project over there, which is really, really awesome and inspiring.
Thank you.
Thank you so much for all of your time today. It was awesome chatting with you.
You too. Thank you so much.
And good luck.
Thanks.
Kelsey's book, Big Girl, is awesome, as you heard me mention. It's definitely one of the books that I recommend people pick up if they're looking for more of a memoir type book on giving up dieting. And you can find links to that in the show notes for this episode at summerinnanen.com/141. Thank you so much for listening today. I'll be back with another classic episode in a couple weeks. Rock on.
I'm Summer Innanen, and I want to thank you for listening today. You can follow me on Instagram, Facebook, and Twitter at Summer Innanen. If you haven't yet, go to Apple Podcasts and subscribe, rate, and review this show. I would be so grateful. Until next time, rock on.